So much to get to and unpack on today's show. There is growing buzz that players not really feeling Doc Rivers. How the Sixers are trending right now with a week and change left until the playoffs, not great. Is a James Harden return to Philadelphia a lock, or could he go elsewhere, and could the Sixers not want to bring him back after just a few games? But first, subscribe to the channel as we continue to grow like crazy here on 76ers Now by Chat Sports. We are approaching 6,000 subs, so if you want to stay in the know with all things Sixers, hit that red subscribe button down below for the best Sixers news and rumors coverage here on YouTube. Happy Friday, Philadelphia. You're watching Philadelphia 76ers Now by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Chase Senior. Hope all of you are gearing up to have a fantastic weekend with the NCAA Tournament Final Four taking place on Saturday. Jay Wright's Villanova Wildcats trying to get back to another national championship game. I will spare you of that conversation of whether or not Villanova is a Philadelphia school. I went to Temple University, so I do believe they're in the Big Five, but we're not going to go into that. And yes, they are kind of a Philadelphia school on the peripheries of the city. I said I wasn't going to go there, but I went there. Oh well. So much to get to on today's show, so let's hop into it. So with a week and change left until the NBA playoffs, really things are so closely tied in the Eastern Conference. And with how the Sixers are playing, I don't like how things are trending. I don't like their body language. I don't like the lack of adjustments that Doc Rivers has been making. And the heat beneath the seat of Doc Rivers is starting to get ratcheted up just a tad. Joel Embiid kind of called him out the other day. Then last night, after that listless loss against the Detroit Pistons, in which Cade Cunningham looked fantastic as the former #1 overall pick, kind of called out James Harden when he was asked about the lack of bench production. Doc Rivers basically said, I don't think it was really the bench production. I think more so that lies on James Harden. So we revisit what Joel Embiid said the other night after that close loss against the Milwaukee Bucks and back-to-back losses at the time against the Suns and Bucks, two of the best teams in the NBA. You're thinking, okay, the Sixers are close, but they're not quite there. But they continue to have clunkers against some bad teams, and that is inexcusable as they try to gear up with the playoffs with a new monster addition in James Harden. So Embiid said this the other night. The game really changed when I went on the bench. I didn't think we played at the end of the third, beginning of the fourth. Their best player, speaking of Giannis, of course, who once again last night against the Nets was fantastic, scored like 17 in a row or whatever that was. I didn't think we did what we had to do. They gained some momentum. He also said, we need to match our minutes moving forward. A lot of people believe that was a shot at Doc Rivers. Wosny Lambre of The Ringer also said some interesting things that we'll pivot to here in just a second. But then last night, after Embiid had said that, really just an inexcusable loss against the Detroit Pistons. I understand Detroit has a couple of really good young players, including Saddiq Bey, formerly of Villanova, but yes, they gave the Nets some fits the other night, but you cannot lose this game when you're battling for position in the Eastern Conference with only a few games left in the regular season, when you're trying to gel, find a level of continuity and some form of consistency and identity with the playoffs right around the corner. Now, Joel Embiid was great. 37 points, 15 boards. Looked like the NBA MVP caliber player that we know him to be, especially this year. But I think Giannis has overtaken him the last couple of games. Really the big talking point, James Harden. He was bad last night. There's no other way to put it. 18 points, 9 rebounds, 7 dimes. He was getting physically overwhelmed offensively against some of the defensive players on Detroit, and the shooting percentage was just brutal. Now, we've seen that the Sixers can play with the best teams in the NBA. They've done it all throughout the year. Now, they've struggled to close against some of those aforementioned elite teams in the NBA, but they at least compete with them. But can they beat the best? I'm not sure the answer to that question because of what we've seen from Doc Rivers. We'll get to Doc Rivers here in just a second, but first, I want you to chime into the comments section. Give me your honesty, because I know a lot of you are fired up about this basketball team and the job status of Doc Rivers beyond this year. Scale him among all NBA coaches from 1 to 30, because there are, of course, 30 NBA coaches. And let me know in the comments section. That's the pinned comment on today's video. If you get hit with that YouTube ad break, just scroll on down and get your votes in. As for what Wosny Lambre said on the Ringer NBA show, the company that Bill Simmons owns, some interesting things. Now, he prefaced it by saying, aggregators, I don't want you reporting this, but when you say something like this, there's significance to it. A few weeks ago, he started by saying, because I'm decently tapped in with the player side of what's happening with the Sixers, though I don't know anybody in the Daryl Morey administration, I'm hearing, man, guys are not feeling Doc Rivers. His rotations, his philosophy, what he's doing, guys aren't feeling it. To me, sometimes you can chalk it up to be like, I should be playing more. That's every NBA player, so I'm like, I'm ignoring this. But it's hard to ignore considering how the Sixers have played against mediocre to bad teams in the NBA, how they failed to close out against some of the top teams in the NBA, the body language that we're seeing, the stagnation offensively, and some of the things that we've seen transpire throughout Doc Rivers' entire coaching career, but also while with the Sixers over the last 2 years, especially the playoff flameout last year against the Atlanta Hawks when he got lapped by Nate McMillan and some of the adjustments weren't made in game. Now, a couple of things can be true with Doc Rivers and the Philadelphia 76ers. James Harden, no question, has to be better, but the story on Doc Rivers is out. He's blown the most 3-1 leads among all coaches in the history of the NBA. His failure to make adjustments throughout the course of games and playoff series can be questioned, and it's a sketchy resume up to this point. What he did with the Boston Celtics was great with Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, as well as Ray Allen, but this team ain't that team. Those are 3 bona fide future Hall of Famers. James Harden, Joel Embiid, future Hall of Famers, but since that point, playoff collapses with the Los Angeles Clippers, playoff collapses with the Philadelphia 76ers, and this year, how the Sixers are trending with only a couple of games to go until the NBA playoffs is alarming. And remember this, Daryl Morey did not hire Doc Rivers. So if the Sixers have yet another early playoff flameout, and they get booted in the first or second round of the NBA playoffs, I think Doc Rivers is toast. You know the noise from the city of Philadelphia is going to increase, get hotter, and get louder, but also the players are not going to be satisfied, especially the face of the franchise in Joel Embiid, if the Sixers once again get bounced early in the playoffs. And a lot of that blame will be directed toward Doc Rivers because the history and the resume shows his teams come up short when they're talented and in the regular season win a lot of games. There's also this. Doc called out James Harden after that listless loss to Detroit and not the bench. And if there's anybody that's going to get sensitive and not respond well to criticism, it's James Harden, the same guy who's asked out of his previous 2 destinations. With the playoffs around the corner, folks, this ain't good. Is Doc Rivers on the hot seat? You let me know right now. Type Y for yes or type N for no. Is the temperature rising for Doc? And in a few months, maybe we're looking at some Doc Rivers replacements. You let me know. Also, as I mentioned off the top, NCAA tournament, Final Four, tipping off on Saturday night. Couple of really good matchups. Duke and UNC are facing off for the first time in history. They've never played each other in the NCAA tournament, which is crazy. Then we have a rematch yet again between Kansas and Villanova. I like Duke to win. I like Villanova to win. Who do you like? Here are the championship odds, and if you want to play some bets, you can do so no matter where you live, thanks to our sportsbook partner, BetUS. Head to chatsports.com/bet, enter the promo code CHAT125 for a 125% deposit bonus. Let's say you put in $100. By using that link in that promo code, you get $125 back. Once again, championship odds for the Final Four with the NCAA championship on Monday night. Who's it going to be? I'm going Duke against Villanova. You let me know. As for James Harden and how he's been trending, first 5 games were awesome. He was great. 24.5 points per game, 12.5 dimes per night, 7.5 rebounds, nearly a triple-double night in, night out. You look at the field goal and three-point percentages, really, really good. The Sixers were an entertaining watch. They were moving in the right direction. They were humming offensively. We saw so much ball movement, 53% from the deck, almost 45% from downtown. How about the last 11 games? He has not been the same player, and he hasn't had the same burst, and the offense has been stagnant. Points per game down to 21 plus. Assists down. Rebounds down. The field goal percentage and percentage from beyond the arc, not good at all. He needs his three-point shot to be an elite player. 36.5% from the field and a paltry 30% from downtown. So I want to give you 5 thoughts on James Harden, and I believe all these things to be true. First 5 games were Liddy in Philadelphia. We're like, yo, we're taking laps around Brooklyn. We won the trade, no doubt. But now, I have some questions because the depth has been diminished, and because of that, the Sixers bench has been bad, and Harden has been bad. 5 thoughts on James Harden in rapid-fire fashion. He's struggling to get by people, and James Harden has never been the most elite athlete or twitchy athlete. So when he loses half a step even, it becomes a little bit troublesome for him when he lacks that explosion to get by people. He's also not finishing strong at the rim, which I don't think is good for him because he just goes at the rim in a weak way, acting as though he's going to get every call. He hasn't been getting those fouls because some of the changes made by officials where they're letting more physical play fly, and because of that hasn't benefited James Harden's game, and he struggled because of that. The offense has also grown a little bit stagnant. Not enough ball movement. And then the first 5 games after the trade, they went 5-0. He was playing great. The offense had so much ball movement. Tyrese Maxey was going off. Tobias Harris was getting open looks. The pick and roll with Joel Embiid was dominant. The pick and pop was even utilized good. And James Harden was hitting threes and also moving the ball. But I've seen so much dribble ISO and him trying to break guys down one-on-one and wasting the shot clock. And that's never been the most efficient way to win in the playoffs. And when he loses about a half step, that becomes even more problematic for James Harden. There will also be a ton of pressure on James Harden going into the NBA playoffs. Going into the big dance, does any player in the NBA have more pressure on him than James Harden? My answer to that question, no. There's so much pressure on him. He's trying to land another contract. He's trying to prove that he can last these prime years and extend them just a little bit. As of right now, doesn't look pretty at the moment, but there will be a ton of pressure on him because he's asked out of his previous 2 destinations, and if Philadelphia goes out early in the playoffs, once again, as we talked about, the fire is going to be on in Philly. It's also not a guarantee, lastly, that James Harden is going to be back next year with the Sixers. If they think they can upgrade their roster in a better way, like going after a Bradley Beal, going after a Damian Lillard with the money that would be allocated to James Harden, I don't think Daryl Morey will take long to pivot to another superstar player out there because he realizes he has to maximize the prime years of Joel Embiid while he's playing at an MVP level, and there are concerns about him lasting long because of his size and his injury history. James Harden is a player option next year, so I don't think it's a guarantee as of now that he returns. It's all going to come down to how the Sixers and him perform in the NBA playoffs. If they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, I think Doc Rivers is back. I think James Harden is back. If they fail to advance past the first or second round, I think Doc Rivers gets fired, and I think the Sixers move on from James Harden, and I think they go after a player like Damian Lillard or Bradley Beal because I think those players look at what Philadelphia has at its disposal with Joel Embiid being one of the most dominant players in the NBA. They'd want to come here, and the Sixers would have to allocate that money elsewhere. And if they free up that contract for Tobias Harris, gives you even more flexibility. Something to monitor as we move forward. Is Harden washed? My last question for the audience before I hop on out of here. Type W for washed, E for elite. Get those votes in. Have a great weekend. Let me know if James Harden is cooked or not. And as always, thanks for watching the show.